Analytical and direct. Human cultural products take the raw input of experience and transform it into organized meaning. But the structural architectures used to accomplish this vary wildly from one work to the next. A work of classical philosophy constructs meaning through highly abstract, explicit reasoning, building a framework of formal logical arguments. An animal fable takes the opposite approach, forcing abstract ideas like ethics and political strategy into concrete, perceptible narratives. Both are sophisticated technologies for processing thought, and understanding them requires a unified system of measurement. We can begin to solve this with the cognitive content ratio, or CCR. This acts as a heuristic index, estimating the relative cognitive organization manifested on the page, rather than measuring literal brain activity. To understand the nature of genius, we have to look past static rankings of which text is smarter. Instead, we must map how these works expand the multidimensional phase space of human cognition. This is the baseline 1D equation of CCR. It breaks cognition into 6 components, from sensory to metacognitive thought. When analyzing an observational travelogue, the data maps cleanly to the left. The author records what they see, anchoring cognition to perception. These percentages serve as comparative heuristics. They are tools for classification, helping us identify the dominant cognitive mode of a work. But the one-dimensional model breaks down when we encounter a narrative that uses almost no explicit conceptual words, yet still triggers massive conceptual processing in the reader. This model hits a structural limit because it conflates manifest CCR, the literal words on the page, with evoked CCR, the complex cognitive activity actually generated inside the mind. The film The Cow illustrates this limitation. Its explicit script has little conceptual exposition, but the conceptual depth it evokes is significant. The narrative trajectory moves from a simple physical object, a man's cow, to a state of profound identity destabilization. The physical animal is progressively treated as a complex symbol of the self. We see a different structure in The Blind Owl. This narrative abandons external constraints entirely, circulating in a loop of unconstrained internal memory and surreal association. Comparing these works to rigid philosophy requires us to measure variables that a simple abstraction score ignores. To accurately map the diversity of thought, we need to track internal generation and organizational constraint as independent dimensions. This 3D coordinate system visualizes cognitive organizational space, plotting a work's architectural signature. Kant's critique occupies a corner of high abstraction and maximum organizational constraint. The Blind Owl plots in an opposite region of high internal generation and low constraint. Allegorical works like Attar's Conference of the Birds reach high conceptual regions through symbolism rather than the analytical constraints of philosophy. We must also note that high abstraction does not ensure empirical truth. Conceptual systems can become mathematically elaborate while losing their real-world anchors. Kant is not cognitively higher than these authors. They simply master and map different organizational regions within a shared cognitive space. Instead of static locations, we track active movement using the cognitive transformation trajectory. Kalila Wadimna uses a downward loop, compressing abstract concepts into perceptible animal narratives. The audience reverses this operation, unpacking the story back into a practical concept. This continuous loop defines conceptual translation efficiency. It allows for the transport of complex relational knowledge without relying on explicit analytical exposition. Kant's trajectory runs in the opposite direction, moving recursively to investigate the metacognitive structures that make thought possible in the first place. These texts operate as cognitive algorithms, vectors designed to force the brain through specific high-value transformations. To understand the hardware executing these vectors, we have to distinguish anatomical grain space from functional cognitive space. Creative production relies on dynamic, rapid interactions between the default mode networks, which generate internal material, and executive control systems, which evaluate and constrain it. High cognitive output does not map to a single hotspot in the brain. It depends on the large-scale, timed coordination of these distributed systems. This raises a question. Does this kind of genius require a historically evolved, genetically superior biological brain? Evidence suggests otherwise. Individual brilliance stems from shared biological architecture, navigating deeply enriched, dynamically coordinated states. The trajectories we've plotted, from Kant's logic to the fables of the jackals, represent a relentless, generational accumulation of tools. This process is known as cumulative cultural evolution. These tools act as external cognitive scaffolding. Language, mathematics, and narrative forms permanently expand the accessible phase space for every generation that follows. Libraries and archives effectively externalize human memory, allowing a single mind to process frameworks that took centuries to build. Multi-generational transmission, like the centuries of translation seen in the fables, preserves relational cognitive organization, even as the surface languages change. A modern thinker does not inherit a genetically upgraded brain, but a vastly richer map of pre-calculated trajectories left behind by their ancestors. Human history tracks the mapping of an ever-expanding cognitive universe, proving that extraordinary genius is both an individual triumph and a historical inheritance.